All right, so welcome to this deep dive. And today we're really diving deep into something that's been on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
What's going on with the political landscape now after Trump's second term?
Yeah, it's a bit of a wild world out there.
Yeah, really is. And we've got a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
We've got this really interesting article by Slavoj Žižek from eFlux, transcripts of 3 different YouTube videos, 2 featuring Žižek, 1 a lecture talking about him, and then we've got articles from Compact, The Independent, and Hank Yor.
Wow, a lot of material.
Yeah, we're going to try and explore different perspectives, figure out what's really going on behind the scenes, and then see if we can learn something from all this.
Yeah, and it's not just looking back, it's trying to figure out
Right.
where things are headed.
Yeah.
And it all starts with understanding one thing that might surprise you. Trump didn't actually gain more votes in 2024
Yeah, I noticed that too when I was looking through the material.
compared to 2020.
Yeah, they were saying that Kamala Harris actually lost a pretty big chunk of the votes that Biden won, and that's what really,
Yeah, she lost a lot of Biden voters.
yeah, it makes you wonder.
And that's really what tipped the scales.
Right.
Yeah, and this is where Yurjek's analogy comes in.
Okay.
You know, the climber who, after failing to reach the summit, has to go all the way back down to the starting point, what he calls 0 point.
Okay.
He's arguing that the left needs to seriously reassess.
Like, go all the way back to the beginning.
Pretty much. Figure out what they missed along the way.
Like, hit the reset button, look at the whole map again.
Exactly.
Instead of just
Not just tweaking the strategy, but
Right.
questioning the whole approach.
whole approach, yeah.
Now, the sources also get into, what's the appeal of figures like Trump, this obscene master, as Ejek calls them.
Right.
This idea that someone who breaks all the rules, who's vulgar, outrageous,
Yeah.
somehow becomes a symbol of authenticity.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about too.
Yeah.
Why are people drawn to that? Is it just because it's like, oh, we hate political correctness or
I think there's something deeper going on.
Okay.
It's this rebellion against the polished and the predictable, but it also speaks to this craving for straightforward talk, even if it's offensive, because it feels genuine.
Even if it's offensive, yeah.
When everything else feels so
So-
carefully crafted.
It's like they want someone who just says what's on their mind, whether it's right,
Yeah.
wrong,
Instead of someone who's
polished, perfect.
polished and insincere.
Yeah.
And here's another thing that might surprise you.
So-
The sources point out that immigrants, particularly from Latin America,
Why?
often lean towards conservatism.
That's interesting because I feel like you'd think that they would be more on the progressive side,
Yeah.
coming into a new country.
Well, the sources suggest that a lot of immigrants are actually focused on achieving success within the existing system,
Right.
not on overhauling it.
Makes sense.
It's about working hard, building a better life,
Right.
not dismantling the whole system.
Right, so they're coming to work within the system, not
Yeah.
trying to revolutionize the system.
Exactly. They're here to participate, not to revolutionize. And that actually ties into one of Yushek's ideas,
Okay.
the whole theft of enjoyment thing, this feeling that something's being taken away.
Uh-huh.
He uses that to understand events like the Capitol riot.
Right.
This feeling
That their way of life is being taken.
yeah, that their jobs, their way of life,
Hmm.
their sense of belonging are being stolen. That fuels resentment, anger.
Right.
And figures like Trump, they tap into that.
So they're giving a voice to that frustration.
Exactly. They channel it into this kind of political spectacle.
So is he saying instead of looking at the Capitol riot as like a serious coup attempt, it was more of
It's almost like
just an outburst?
a kind of cathartic release,
Uh-huh.
letting loose all this pent-up anger and frustration.
Right.
It's destructive, but it also reveals
It's something deeper going on.
Yeah, this deep discontent that can't be ignored.
Right, and it brings up the whole question of how do we address that discontent in a constructive way?
Exactly. And that brings us to this fascinating paradox.
Okay.
Trump, a figure who seems to embody everything the permissive society should reject.
Right.
He's actually a product of that very society.
Wait, how can you say that? Because he's like,
It's a bit of a head scratcher, right?
yeah, he's totally against everything that the permissive society seems to stand for.
Well, Zizek argues that Trump isn't a throwback to some earlier era,
Okay.
but a symptom of the contradictions at the heart of our modern permissive society.
Yeah.
He points to this concept of fetishistic desublimation,
Okay.
which sounds complicated,
Yeah.
but it basically boils down to this. Capitalism disguises society's moral constraints as personal desires.
Okay.
Instead of feeling like we should do something, we're bombarded with messages about what we want, what we deserve.
Oh, okay. So we're being manipulated into wanting things
Exactly.
that we don't actually need.
And in the process, we become less happy.
We're constantly chasing the next thing.
We crave something more substantial.
Right. Like it's an empty pursuit of...
And that yearning creates a space for someone like Trump.
Oh, I see what you mean.
To step in and offer a sense of certainty and belonging.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it's like the permissive society that's supposed to be all about freedom and choice actually ends up leaving people feeling empty.
Exactly.
And that emptiness becomes fertile ground for someone like Trump to come in and say, I've got the answers.
Exactly. It makes you question whether the current system can actually provide that meaning, that security.
Right, but what's the alternative?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
And the sources also get into, the left's response to Trump
and
how they might have actually strengthened his appeal.
What do you mean?
Well, they point to the constant mocking, the scolding, which, instead of turning people away, made him seem even more relatable.
Because people feel like they're being mocked and scolded, too.
It reinforces the perception that they're out of touch with the concerns of ordinary people.
Yeah, because if you feel like you're being misunderstood...
Exactly.
And then someone is saying all these crazy things, but you kind of agree with them.
And then you're told you're wrong, you're stupid.
Yeah, you're just going to dig in deeper.
It makes you dig in your heels even harder.
Right.
And this is where Žižek's critique of the left becomes really relevant. He argues they need to move beyond just criticizing Trump and offer a compelling alternative narrative.
So not just point out what's wrong, but give an actual alternative.
Yeah, one that speaks to the anxieties, the aspirations of those who feel left behind.
Okay, so something that people can really grab onto.
Exactly, and that's what we'll delve into next. We'll explore whether liberal democracy as it exists can actually meet these challenges, or whether we're headed toward a more fundamental shift.
In the global political landscape.
Exciting stuff.
Yeah, it is.
So we've been talking about this need for a better story, a better narrative from the left, one that really speaks to people. But even with that, can liberal democracy as we know it actually deal with all this stuff that's going on?
That's the big question. And the sources definitely don't shy away from that. Žižek especially, he's worried about this potential erosion.
Not a sudden, overthrow, but...
Yeah, more like a
fading away.
Yeah, a gradual, kind of almost imperceptible shift.
Interesting.
Yeah, those small changes that happen over time.
Right.
And then you suddenly realize...
It's too late.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah.
How did we get here?
It's like that joke he tells, about the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
Reassuring the wife.
The surgery went well, but there are a few complications.
And the punchline is...
The husband's dead.
Yeah, so it's like, you think things are okay.
But actually, they're falling apart. Underneath.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder if this whole system can even handle all this change.
And that's where the whole MAGA versus MEGA thing...
Yeah, what is that all about?
Gets interesting because the sources suggest that MAGA, with its focus on America first, might actually be pushing the U.S. towards being more of a regional power.
Instead of leading the world, they're kind of pulling back.
More like the BRICS countries.
Oh, okay.
Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Okay.
Those up-and-coming powers.
So America first might actually mean America less powerful.
In a way, yeah.
Okay.
And that's where MEGA comes in.
Okay.
Make Europe great again.
Right.
The sources argue that Europe, with its history of, emancipation, social justice, rejection of nationalism, could offer a different path.
Oh, so it's like a counter...
Yeah, a counter narrative.
To the rising tide of...
Yeah, to populism, to isolationism.
Okay.
A more interconnected, cooperative world.
But what about this whole potential for, global conflict?
Right.
Especially with what's going on in Ukraine.
Yeah, they're pretty worried about that.
Yeah.
It's not just about, geopolitics.
It's deeper than that.
Yeah, clash of ideologies, anxieties, historical grievances. They talk about the need to really set limits on Russia, present a united front to prevent things from escalating.
Because the stakes are pretty high right now.
Yeah, it feels like we're at a real turning point where things could go.
Yeah, it feels like...
It's in very different directions.
Things could go really bad, or maybe there's a chance for something better.
And it's not just the political landscape.
What else is shifting?
Yeah, the sources talk about the decline of traditional Christianity in the West.
Okay.
But alongside that, The rise of what they call this kind of Western Buddhism among the elites.
Interesting.
Yeah, so as the old institutions start to lose their grip.
People are looking for something else.
Yeah, new ways to find meaning, solace.
So like meditation, mindfulness, all that.
Exactly.
It's more individual than like going to church.
But Žižek argues that true atheism actually comes from Christianity.
Really?
So he says this idea of a world without a divine puppet master where we're responsible
for ourselves.
Yeah, for creating our own meaning. That's a radical concept.
Okay.
And it has roots in Christian thought.
Interesting.
It's not about rejecting spirituality. It's about
taking ownership.
Yeah, embracing a different kind of responsibility for our choices.
So there's no easy answers.
No.
We have to
grapple with the complexity.
And make our own choices.
And those choices will determine the future.
Yeah, and that brings us to this last point about the split within the Trumpian movement itself.
Yeah, between the tech elites like Elon Musk and the populists like Steve Bannon.
Okay, so two very different visions.
It's like a microcosm of the larger
divide in society.
Globalization versus those who feel threatened by it.
Yeah.
Like those Costco guys.
Oh, yeah.
They became internet famous.
Just making funny videos.
Yeah.
It's like anyone can be a voice now.
Exactly.
In this digital age.
It's a double-edged sword.
Right, because it can be good or bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have the whole immigration debate.
Right, so the tech leaders are saying, open the borders.
Bring in the talent.
Get the best and the brightest.
And the populists are saying,
they're taking our jobs.
They're the problem.
Yeah.
So it's this really
complicated
issue.
And the sources suggest that Trump managed to hold this fragile coalition together.
Of these very different groups.
Yeah, but it's unstable.
Right, it could fall apart.
Exactly.
So what's the takeaway from all of this? We've gone from, the appeal of Trump to global conflict to, religion changing.
It's a lot. Yeah. Where do we go from here? Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it really is.
It feels like we're at one of those points in history where things could go any which way.
It's like we're standing on the edge of something new, and we don't really know what it's going to look like.
Exactly. Yeah, and as we've been talking about this whole tension between like embracing the future and then clinging to the past.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
It really is, yeah.
We see it in politics, we see it in religion, we even see it in technology.
Yeah, this constant back and forth between what was and what could be.
Right.
And to figure it out, I think we need to really understand the forces that are at play, the stories that we're telling ourselves, and the choices that we make, individually.
Yeah, I was thinking about that as we were going through all of these sources, because you've got Žižek, and he's coming at it from this very philosophical perspective.
Right. He's the big thinker.
Right. And then you've got the YouTube videos. And those are a little bit more...
Yeah, a little more down to earth.
Yeah, more like everyday people talking about these things. And then the articles we looked at from Compact, The Independent, and Hank Iora.
Yeah, they're all looking at different aspects.
Yeah, they're all coming at it from a different angle.
It's like pieces of a puzzle,
Yeah, and I think it's so important to get these different perspectives because it's easy to get stuck in your own little bubble.
Oh, absolutely. Surrounded by people who just agree with you all the time.
Yeah, and you think, oh, this is the way it is. But really, there's all these other viewpoints out there.
Got to get out of that echo chamber.
You got to get uncomfortable. You got to hear things that you don't necessarily want to hear.
Exactly. That's how we learn and grow, right?
Yeah.
And that's what makes a deep dive like this so interesting.
Right.
Exploring different angles.
Connecting the dots.
Yeah, and hopefully coming out of it with a better understanding of
the big picture.
Yeah, how it all fits together.
Yeah. So where does that leave us now? We've talked about Trump, we've talked about global conflict, we've talked about the future of religion.
It's a lot to process.
It is. What's the main takeaway?
I think the biggest thing is that the future is not set in stone.
Yeah.
It's being shaped right now.
By us.
By the choices we make, the actions we take.
So it's not just about watching it happen. Yeah. We're actually part of it.
Exactly. We're writing the next chapter.
Okay, so we're not just passengers, we're the drivers.
We have a responsibility to engage, to challenge the things that divide us.
To try to make things better.
To build a future we actually want to live in.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful thought.
It is. It's empowering.
It is empowering. Well, thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us.
It's been a pleasure.
I think we've all learned a lot about this really complex, kind of crazy world we live in.
Yeah, it's a wild ride.
And remember, the future is not something that just happens. It's something we create together.
We all have a role to play.
So go out there and play it.